Okay, so I just want to finish up these two little paragraphs in the footnotes because we were talking about the importance of paying your workers at the end of the job. But we also saw that if the worker is manufacturing something for you from scratch, that's not on your property. In other words, it's not your possessions that he's fixing, but rather manufacturing something new for you, like build me a new chair or a new table. So there's the same obligations of Baltolin of you have to pay him as soon as his job is done does not apply. Now that doesn't mean that you don't have to pay him on time. It just means that you don't incur the same prohibition because he's selling something new to you. He's not it's not he's not considered to be under your employ, but rather he's considered to be a mocher, a seller. Now, when someone sells an item to you, he should not leave without getting paid cash. But that's between the buyer and the seller to negotiate. Okay, now,
With custom order for this chair.
yeah, even if it's a custom order, even if it's a custom order that he's just making it for me, he's not considered to be my laborer.
Is it because you're not employed by him?
No, it's because he's building something new for me and then selling it to me. So he's a seller. He's not an employee. Okay, so I just want to point out that the last two paragraphs, he says, "Uvistei chemed herich be'inyan tashlum schar sacher." The Stei Chemed was written in the 19th century, if I'm not mistaken, by a Rav who lived in Hebron. Um, and many of us have visited we've driven by his old yeshiva, of the Stei Chemed. He wrote an encyclopedic work, multi-volume work. It was the first of its kind. It was really groundbreaking. And he has this long essay on the obligation to pay a worker on time. And he quotes from the name of the Arizal, She'eno mekabel kedushas neshama yisera b'Shabbos im lo paras schar sachir. If you haven't yet paid your workers, you don't receive the neshama yisera on Shabbos when their wages are due and you fail to pay them. B'sham herich b'shem hachinuch, and he speaks extensively there. And then he quotes the Chafetz Chaim, U'b'sefer Avos Chesed the Chafetz Chaim Zal. He says, "Kasav sham uve'erb Shabbos shahaminig lifsok mimalacha ma'at zman kodem shkia sachama." He says on
Sorry,
Friday,
Rabbi. Sorry, Rabbi, to cut you off, but where are we holding? I just got here.
we're in the laws of kovesh schar sachir, of not paying workers on time. So do you see the screen?
Yes, yes,
Shlomo? Okay,
yes.
great.
Thank you.
You got it. So he said the Chafetz Chaim writes that when we're dealing with workers who are not being paid um, on Fridays, when the minhag is to stop working a little bit before sunset. So if he's a day laborer and his wages are due that day, yesh lo lamaher lefroa kodem hashkia im tivao the yesh lo mos. So if the employer has the money and the worker wants to get paid before Shabbos, you have to do whatever you can to make sure that he gets his money before sunset. And in doing so, you fulfill that mitzvah, the positive mitzvah. שאפשר דבמקומו היה מנהג לעשות עד שקיע סחמה, או דמרי שלא השיג המוס לפרוע שקיע סחמה ינשם. So even though the Sefer HaChinuch had said that you're not obligated to pay him until after Shabbos, that could be in a case where people worked literally until the last minute. And then, okay, then you have no choice. Okay, but under normal circumstances, if you have the ability to pay him before Shabbos, you should do so.
You think, just to be mentioned, if he worked a full day, maybe you could pay him for what he worked till noon or something like that, so he goes home with something, and then pay him the balance.
Yeah,
He
I
works
mean, you
that
could,
day.
although the question is, are you under a halachic obligation to do so? Right. I mean, obviously, you want to try and be as ehrlich, menschlich as you possibly can.
I mean, the water from the urn looks very yellow, so Rabbi wanted,
Well, they say don't eat yellow snow, right?
that's what they say. I don't think that's the same reason, hopefully not. Oh, sorry, I thought it's going for water.
He died in 1904.
Yeah.
Not from eating yellow snow, though.
Yeah, no. Okay. You remember we were by his
Yeah.
yeshiva. Okay, what was his name again?
I am Christian Medini.
Medini, right? Okay. Okay. Let's do the next one. Shayla. Schir sha'ot biyom she'eno oved ad sof hayom. Okay, what if a guy is an hourly employee, meaning he gets a certain wage per hour, and he works until the end of the day? O schir sha'ot balayla she'eno oved ad sof halayla. Or he works at night with an hourly wage and he finishes his job at dawn. O schir shavua, o schir chodesh, mahu hazman shehiksiv la'otam shehizkarnu. Or let's say he gets paid by the week or by the month. In other words, the salary that he gets paid is not as a day laborer, because that's really what the Torah was addressing. But there are so many other structures in employment contracts. So in those cases, what is the time when payment is due to him? She'im haba'olim lo yishalmu lahem la'achar gemar avodasam lo ya'avru al iser. He says, because in those cases, is it possible that if they don't pay, if the employer doesn't pay at the end of the day, or the end of the end of the workday, that they're not in violation? V'imacharei hazman shenikva b'haya im lo yishalmu ya'avru al bal tolin v'alasem me'atorah b'yom l'titein scharo. So he basically wants to know, what are the prohibitions or the obligations of an employer when it's not a day laborer, but an hour laborer or a week laborer or a month laborer? So the answer is, hazmanim sheksiv l'chol echad me haschirim sheizkarnu, shaba'olim chayavim l'shalim maskortim kedei lo ya'avor al iser, av shelo shilmu bizman gemar malachta miyad. He says, in order to avoid being oiver on any kind of prohibition, if they're not paying at the end of the workday, im hu schir sha'ot biyom yachol l'shalom l'schir ad sof hayom, dahainu ad shkiyas hachama. So if he is being paid by the hour, so then you should pay him by the end of the day of the workday, which is by sunset. Vim over hayom v'lo shilim l'schir over belava aseh shel Torah. And if you don't, then you're in violation of a negative commandment. Now, of course, this is where there was no work contract. There was no custom set up. But obviously, in most employment situations, you pay people at the end of a pay period, right? And when they're an employee. Here's what he's talking about is a guy is a handyman and he works by the hour. So there's no work contract. And in that kind of situation, where it could be work that's you only need him for a few hours. But whenever he's finished, you have an obligation to pay him whatever his hourly wage is. Like a plumber comes over and he works. Now, sometimes the plumber says, here's the bill, you can pay me. Or like we learned before, sometimes he says, I'm going to send you the bill by email and then you'll pay me. So then you don't become liable to pay and you're not in violation if he leaves. Bless you. Because a lot of times the plumber may say, I got to run, I'm too busy. And you're not doing him a favor by taking the extra 10 minutes to get your funds or write a check or to do an e-transfer or whatever it is. He may tell you, I'm too busy right now, and please take care of it later. V'chein schir sha'ot b'layla im lo shilim lo miyad b'gmar avodaso yesh lo zman l'shalom v'schir ad alos ha'shachar aval acharei zman ze v'hala im lo shilim over b'lav v'aseh. And similarly, if a guy's working the hours for you at nighttime, you have until dawn to pay him for the hours that he worked, and if not, you're in violation. V'chein hadin legavi schir shavua sheniskar lasos malacha b'meshech shavua yamin v'siyim avodaso b'yom. And the same thing will be if you hired a guy to work for you for a full week, and the week is over, and there's still time in the day to pay him. Yesh lo l'shalom escharo kodem shkiyas hachama. There too, you must pay him before the sun sets. V'chein schir chodesh, schir shana, or schir sheva shanim shesimu malachtem biyom. Yesh lo l'shalom escharim kodem shkiyas hachama. And similarly, if the guy was hired for a month, or even a year or 7 years, as soon as that period is finished, you have until the end of that day to pay him. Okay, and if they finish their job at night, then you have until dawn to pay them. And if you fail to pay them, so then you're in violation of the Torah. So the bottom line is that it doesn't matter if they're a day laborer, an hour laborer, a week laborer, a month laborer. As soon as the period of work that you've contracted them for is completed, you must pay them until either sunset or dawn, depending upon whether their completion is during the day or during the night.
So the plumber rush out there and didn't give the bill, and he didn't give the bill for a day or so, you're responsible to.
No, you're only liable. The clock doesn't start, like Paul says, until he presents you with the bill.
Bill, not the
Yeah.
job.
Not the job. Yeah, a lot of times he says, I don't have time to put together a bill for you now. I'll send it to you later tonight.
You have a moral obligation to remind them, but he forgets.
Do you have a moral obligation to remind him? It's very uncommon for that to occur. I've had that situation though, plenty of times where a guy does work and I don't hear from him for a few days. So I've actually texted the guy and say, like, I'm still waiting to pay you. I hate it when I owe people money. Like, absolutely, it's like the one thing I really dislike in life is when I know that I owe somebody money. And so I tend to run after them.
But Torah, you don't have to. For the bill.
I would think.
What?
So halachically, you don't need.
Halachically, you're under no obligation until he sends you a bill. If you feel he's forgotten about it, so then you should definitely remind him. You do have a halachic obligation to pay your debts.
You don't want to go shemayim owe money.
That's right. That's right. Okay.
I have a situation where I have an electrician. From the community here, he's a little scattered, but he's a good electrician, and he starts jobs and then he goes months until he finishes them. So
That's shocking.
so what do you do in a situation like that? Like,
Unfinished.
he's probably even forgotten about it. I text him, and he's just a really busy guy, but I don't know. I know that. I owe him money now, like for a job that he started. It's not crucial for me to finish
The
it.
job is, you're not liable to pay him until the job is finished. But there's a certain dereliction on his part, because once a person starts a job, he has an obligation to complete it in a timely manner for his employer. Yeah. What's that?
I'll remind him about that.
Yeah.
It's a firm guy.
Yeah. Okay. She'ila. Hamavid v'hasachir kavu zman l'tashlum. So the employer and the employee agreed upon a time when payment was due. Shebigmar avodasu yikabel haschir et hatashlum, so that, for example, at the completion of the job, the employee would get paid. Uvahagia zman hatashlum docha oto. And once the payment is due, lo and behold, the employer says, I'm going to have to pay you a little bit later. I'll get back to you. Or if the employer uses the money that he owes the guy and instead goes on a vacation or something else. So what violations, what averas has the guy committed when he doesn't pay on time? So the answer is tshuva. If you withhold the wages from an employee, and again, remember, this is where you have the ability to pay him, but you just choose it's inconvenient, or you just want to keep the guy waiting. It's as if you're taking away his soul. It's as if you're killing him. Shenemar ve'elav hu nosei et nafsho, because the Torah says explicitly that he is turning his soul towards you, or his soul depends on you.
Hmm.
ולכן אם המעביד דוחה אותו ואינו רוצה לשלם בזמן שקבעו ועושק את ממון השכיר, and therefore any time where an employer delays payment and deflects his obligation, midin Torah over hamavid al ha-chamisha lavin va'aseh. He's violating 5 negative commandments and 1 positive commandment. Ve'eluhein, and they are as follows. Lo tigzol, don't steal, because if I owe you money and I fail to pay you, I'm stealing from you. Lo ta'ashok schar sachir, do not oppress the day laborer. Lo ta'ashok et re'acha, do not oppress your fellow, which means any act that is considered oppressive or mean to someone you're in violation of. Lo talin, do not delay payment. Lo tavo alav hashemesh, do not allow the sun to go down without paying him. And those are the five negative commandments. Mitzvah aseh biyamoti tein scharo. And the positive commandment is, on that same day, you shall give him his payment. Kol zenemar v'parshas vayikra u'v'parshas dvarim. So again, he means to say sefer vayikra and sefer dvarim. He doesn't mean parsha. V'yesh omrim sha'ovrim al arba'a lavin v'aseh. And some say it's only 4 negative commandments, not 5. Okay, big deal.
You're not stealing, you're gonna pay. This is not about stealing.
Right.
This is
So
about
so
paying
that,
on time.
that's the reason why the other opinion says it's not stealing.
So
But it is, but by the way, it is a form of stealing, though. You should know it's a form of stealing. Whether it technically qualifies under lo tigzol is the debate. But it is a form of stealing. Even if I fail to, even if I play a trick on you and I grab your cup of coffee and say la da 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 da, I just stole from you, right? It's it's an avera unless you have a good sense of humor and you're happy for me to do that. Okay.
What is school tuition? Is this part of this also? Were you paying teachers to the school?
I mean, I think you'd have to make a good argument that by my not paying my tuition on time, the teachers are not going to get paid. That's usually not the case. Usually it's not the case that there's a direct cause and effect, that by Hal Biren, 1 parent out of 500 who's not paying his tuition, the teachers will not get.
No, or this or for that, or nothing like that.
Well, you're obligated to pay your debts on time. A person who doesn't pay his debts on time may be liable for something else. But any debtor who fails to pay his debts on time, when you have the ability to do so, but you just don't want, let's say you have this psychological block. I don't want to pay. I don't like paying tuition, right? I don't like paying my shul membership or whatever it is. Can we point to an Isser Deoraisa that you violated? I suppose, certainly at least Midorabanan, we have Psukim in Mishlei who says, blessed is the man who fulfills his obligations, right? I'm forgetting the pasuk at the moment. V'dover emes bilvavo, blessed is the man who speaks truth in his heart. And if he obligates himself to do something, he's going to do it. When you enroll your child in school, you're signing a contract that says I'm going to pay my tuition by such and such a date. And if you fail to do so, then you're in violation unless you make other arrangements in advance. Right?
And people who scam the system, is that what Suzo?
It's a form of lo tigzol. If you're stealing, because you're being provided services and you're not paying for it.
A lot of people make Suzo.
Yeah, and people rationalize, you got to pay your taxes too, and people wiggle out of that as well.
I have to pay for my vacation.
Yeah. But listen, we all have our priorities, right? Okay, Sheila. Bal bayis shelo shilem l'sachir ba'oto hayom ba'asachir lo tava oto bigmar avodah l'shalem lo et tashlum. So let's say an employer did not fail to pay his employee on the day the job was completed. And the employee did not demand payment. He just, he's a mensch. He basically said, the job's finished. Here's my invoice. And that was that. Ha'im hamavid hayitzarech lidog kidei shahatashlum lasachir yagia ba'oto hayom acharei shegamar avodaso kidei shelo yavor al iser bal tolin. Does the employer have to make every effort and worry that the payment will not get to him before sunset? Okay, so that he doesn't violate bal tolin. O kol zman shelo tava hasachir l'shalim lo et hatashlum in abal movrim al iser zeh. Or could you argue that since the employee doesn't seem to mind if I take a couple of days, it's no big deal because he didn't see this. He's not there standing waiting. He's just, he finished the job. He dropped the invoice in my mailbox, and I get home and I see the job is completed and there's my invoice. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I learned in the Choshen Mishpat shir that I've got to pay him today. So I have to scramble to make sure that he gets his money before sunset. So the answer is ein balabais over alisar baltolan ela im kain tevo hasocher l'shalim avur schar avodaso ushetavo v'lahoyelo kesef l'shalim eino over alisar baltolan. So you're not liable for baltolan until the worker says, "Please pay me." Okay. Now, could you interpret that invoice as a demand for payment? You could, but you'd have to get. It would seem to me that in that situation, you should ask him, you should call him and ask him if he's not present. Like, do you have to run around town scrambling to find him? Right? You can call him and ask him, is it okay if I pay you tomorrow? Right? Just to make sure that you're not in violation. Another situation where you're not going to be in violation of Baltalin is if at the time he finishes the job, you literally don't have any fluidity. You simply have no more money in the bank to be able to pay him.
What you had in the morning, you don't have now.
Let's
You
say
shouldn't have hired him.
let's say you didn't anticipate that he would finish the job so quickly. You thought that he'd finish on Friday when you get your paycheck, when you get your auto deposit, but lo and behold, he finished on Wednesday. You didn't realize. Umashi amarnu shim ein lo kesef oiver kol ze dafke im ein lo schara homedes lemechira. And when we say that you're not in violation if you literally don't have cash, that's only if not only are you not fluid, but you have nothing to sell, that you can generate cash. But if you have merchandise that you can sell, if you can liquidate your assets to pay him, and you can do it before sunset, you have an obligation to do that in order not to be over.
Hey, Rabbi.
Don't use that excuse of I don't have money to fail to pay him if you could sell your TV set or your laptop in order to get to pay him.
Hey, Rabbi, I got a question.
Yeah.
I think halachically it should be that if I'm hiring someone to paint my house, for example, and the painter comes and starts painting, it doesn't matter how long he takes. The minute I think halachically he starts a job, you got to have that money, full payment, ready whenever it's done. Like, it's not like, oh, you know what? I don't have money. I still got to work. I'm waiting on my paycheck. What if you lose your job, bro? What if something happens, dog? Like, you know what I mean? Bro, you should have that money as soon as you hire that dude and he starts that job. That money should be put away somewhere, in my opinion.
I mean, I think I happen to agree with you, Shlomo. I think that it would be unethical if a person hired someone, we've talked about this before, if you hire someone without knowing how you're going to pay him. So that would be extremely unethical. However, let's say you anticipate getting money by the end of the week, and the guy happens to, because every Friday you get your auto deposit in your bank account. So you're going to have the money. The problem is the guy finished the day early. And you didn't
I hear
anticipate that.
the discussion and all that. I just
Yeah,
want to bring up
okay.
that point.
Okay, but I appreciate your point.
School that I guess cash flow issues. Very often she didn't get paid again.
Yes.
And they said, well, we don't have the money, we're waiting for donations to come in and come to school. So are they in violation or?
They're not in violation because they don't have the money. When you don't have the money, you're not in violation technically. But let's say you said, Eberster helfen, you left it up to the Almighty to say, we'll come up with the cash. It's fine for you to have bitachon on your own cheshbon, on your own account. But you can't have bitachon on someone else's cheshbon, right? So if you've hired someone else and you're not, I mean, and I know this does happen in the Jewish world, and it's totally not right, where people basically say, "Oh, I'm doing God's work. I'm making sure, like let's say I open up a school for kids, which has happened in this community. Oh, well, opening up a school for kids who don't get accepted to any other school, right? And so that's like such a mitzvah. Okay, who are your donors? Eberster helfen. God will take care of it. Don't worry. I'm not worried. Hashem will make sure that I'll have money to pay my teachers. And then lo and behold, there's no money to pay the teachers, right? Well, that's irresponsible. And one could easily make the argument, Yatsa scharo behefsedo. Every holy intention you had has been consumed by the fact that these teachers were relying on you for their parnasa. You strung them along and you didn't responsibly have a business plan to pay them. So yes, what a noble act you did. You selflessly placed your trust in Hashem that he would make sure your school is successful. But now look at what you've done. You've now denied these people. They've worked hard for you. They're expecting to get compensated so they can put food on their table, and you've failed them. So
If that could happen, maybe, maybe he starts a school, it's like up drawing, everybody's excited at the school, and then like 3 years later, then.
Okay.
challenges come up.
3 years later is 3 years later. I'm just saying that, you have to have a responsible business plan, even when you're doing a mitzvah, right? So just because it's a mitzvah and you're doing God's work doesn't mean that you don't have your Choshen Mishpat responsibilities.
I used to buy the old car. Oh, where's the check? We're walking in the bank and they're all gonna go for a shit, that's a job.
What?
Yeah, that was that.
That's great.
A little bit arrogant.
There are wonderful balabatim in this city, wonderful people, truly good, righteous people in this city, that if they know that a school can't pay its teachers, they will lend the money to the school. Right? You know about that, Moish. Really righteous
Serious.
people. Serious
The
money.
payroll would be huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if the school is short, I know where they've taken money, their source deduction money to pay.
They've taken what?
Their source deduction money.
What does that
from
mean?
School, when you get paid, if you're making $1,000 a week on payroll, you'll get your check for $722 because that's the taxes, that's source deductions. That you as an employer have to deduct from your employees' checks, and that has to be submitted to the government. So I know of 2 schools who took the money that was put aside for source deductions to help pay. They made a decision.
That's very
conscious
dangerous.
decision. Well, it is dangerous because you're stealing government money. You have been put in fact, you are a shaliach for the government. It's like HST money. If you don't pay your HST money, you're stealing government money. That's a serious, they'll come after you for stuff like that.
I'm not sure if that's even stealing. You're borrowing, actually. And
No,
you're not allowed to?
That's your money,
That's
that's not your money, that's stealing.
You know what, if you go bankrupt, right? Everything falls away, all your debts, but not HST money, they'll come after you personally.
Half chapter 7 or
You
chapter.
can't just say, I'm Gagan and I'm finished. No, I'm going bankrupt, sayonara, all my vendors owe you money. Yes, you can legally do that. But when it comes to government money, personally, they will come after you and take your house, take your underwear and take your shoes.
In that order? All right.
It's-
Okay. All right. V'chein im yesh lo pikadon al hava etzel acherim v'higia zman pironim nechshav gam kein sheyesh itach. And so therefore, if you have money that is owed to you by others, and you don't have liquidity now, but you could get liquidity as long as you just collect what's owed to you, then you have an obligation. You're not off the hook. And finally, if you can borrow money to become liquid, you're obligated to do so to be able to pay your laborers on time. So the bottom line is that it's very difficult to fulfill all of the criteria that I don't have money to not pay my workers on time. Because you have to have no asset whatsoever that you can sell. But if you have to pay your workers on time and you have a car or a house, you've got to at least mortgage them in order to pay your workers on time. You can't give the excuse, oh, it's going to cost me too much money to borrow money. Too bad. Your workers deserve to be paid on time. And even if you have to take out a loan with interest, you're obligated to do so. Just don't do it with the mafia, because then you'll get in trouble. All right. Have a great day.
Rabbi, I have one quick question. I don't know if you guys address this or if the halakha will address this. What happens if this is a little bit different, but it's say a worker employer sends a worker home. The worker shows up, employer's like, no, I don't want you, sends him home. Does halakha say, because Canadian law, I don't know if it's still like this, but it used to be you get paid 4 hours. Have you guys addressed this?
Yeah, we dealt with this halacha. Technically, according to halacha, as long as the guy could still find work for that day, you don't have to pay him. But if the argument is that there's no way for him to possibly get work for that day, so then you do have to pay him something. You don't have to pay him the full wage, but you have to pay him something.